I'm Isabella Martinez, 28, and the moment my family walked into my restaurant without knowing it was mine, I watched 15 years of mockery crumble into stunned silence. They were seated directly beneath the bronze plaque that read, Bella's Kitchen, founded by Isabella Martinez, the one they called a dreamer. The irony was so perfect, I almost laughed out loud from my position in the kitchen doorway, watching their faces transform from casual dinner conversation to absolute shock. Before we go deeper, please click the subscribe button and comment down below where you are watching from. Growing up in the Martinez household meant your dreams were either practical or worthless, and cooking fell squarely into the worthless category according to my parents. While my older brother Carlos pursued his engineering degree and my younger sister Sophia prepared for medical school, I spent my evenings in our cramped apartment kitchen, experimenting with whatever ingredients our tight budget could afford. The smell of cumin and garlic became my sanctuary, but to my family, it was just another mess I was making instead of focusing on real career prospects. The first time I mentioned wanting to attend culinary school, I was 16 and helping my mother prepare dinner for one of her book club meetings. The words tumbled out while I carefully seasoned the rice, my hands moving with the confidence that came from years of watching and learning. Mama, I've been thinking about applying to the Culinary Institute after graduation. I know it sounds crazy, but I really think I could make something of myself in the restaurant industry. The wooden spoon in her hand stopped stirring, and she turned to look at me with an expression I'd seen countless times before, the one that said I was being ridiculous without her needing to speak. Mija, cooking is something you do to feed your family, not something you waste money learning in school. You need to think about your future, about stability. Chefs work terrible hours for terrible pay, and most restaurants fail within the first year." End quote. When my father came home that evening, she repeated my suggestion with the same tone she might use to describe finding bugs in the flour. His laugh was immediate and dismissive, the kind that made my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Our Isabella thinks she wants to be a chef," he announced to Carlos, who had looked up from his calculus homework with barely concealed amusement. "Next thing you know, she'll want to be a professional video game player or some other fantasy job." The mockery became a family tradition after that. Every time I lingered too long in the kitchen or mentioned anything related to cooking, someone would make a joke about my unrealistic dreams or suggest I get serious about my future. When I started working part-time at a local diner during my senior year of high school, my mother introduced me to her friends as someone who was still figuring out what she wants to do with her life, even though I'd told her repeatedly exactly what I wanted to do. Sophia was particularly brutal in her assessment of my ambitions. "Isabella lives in a fantasy world where she thinks she can make money playing with food," she'd tell her friends when they visited our apartment. "She doesn't understand that successful people have to make sacrifices and choose careers that actually matter." Her words stung because they echoed the practical voice in my own head, the one that whispered doubts during my long shifts at the diner when my feet ached and my clothes smelled like grease. But something magical happened during those shifts that my family never witnessed. I discovered I had an intuitive understanding of flavors and timing that couldn't be taught from textbooks. The head cook, a weathered man named Tommy who'd worked in restaurant kitchens for 30 years, started letting me help with prep work and eventually trusted me to handle simple orders during busy periods. "You've got natural talent, kid," he told me one evening as we cleaned up after a particularly hectic dinner rush. "Don't let anyone convince you that's not worth something." Tommy's encouragement planted a seed of determination that grew stronger every time my family dismissed my dreams. I started researching culinary schools in secret, using the computer at our local library to read about admission requirements and tuition costs. The numbers were daunting, especially considering my parents had already made it clear they wouldn't contribute a single dollar toward what they considered a waste of educational resources. The turning point came during my high school graduation party, a small gathering in our apartment with extended family and a few close friends. My Aunt Rosa, my mother's sister who lived across town, asked me about my college plans while we stood near the kitchen island I'd helped prepare food on all afternoon. When I mentioned my hope to attend culinary school, she nodded thoughtfully instead of laughing. "You know, Mija, I've watched you cook since you were tall enough to reach the stove," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure my parents weren't listening. "You have something special, something that can't be learned from books. If this is really what you want, don't let anyone talk you out of it, not even family." Her support felt like finding water in a desert, but it also highlighted how alone I was in my conviction. That night, lying in the bed I shared with Sophia, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision that would shape the next decade of my life. I would prove them wrong, not through arguments or protests, but through actions that spoke louder than their doubts. The next morning, I applied for every scholarship the Culinary Institute offered and picked up additional shifts at the diner to start saving money. My parents assumed my increased work hours meant I was finally taking their advice about building a strong work ethic, and I let them believe whatever made them feel better about my choices. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account I opened at a different bank, one they knew nothing about. My acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, along with news that I'd received a partial scholarship based on my essay about using food to bring communities together. The scholarship covered 60% of tuition, which meant I still needed to find funding for the remaining 40% plus living expenses. Instead of celebrating, I felt the weight of impossibility settling on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. That evening at dinner, I decided to make one final attempt at gaining my family's support. "I got accepted to the Culinary Institute," I announced between bites of the chicken and rice I'd prepared. "I also received a scholarship that covers most of the tuition." The silence that followed was deafening. Carlos looked up from his phone with raised eyebrows. Sophia paused mid-chew, and my parents exchanged the kind of look that communicated entire conversations without words. Finally, my father set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. "Isabella, we've talked about this. Cooking school is not a real investment in your future. You're 18 years old, which means you're old enough to make your own decisions, but you're also old enough to understand consequences. If you want to waste your time and money on this fantasy, that's your choice. But don't expect us to support it financially or emotionally." My mother nodded in agreement, adding, "We love you, Mija, but we won't watch you throw away opportunities for something that will never provide the stability you need. Think about your future family, about the life you want to build. Chefs don't make enough money to buy houses or send their children to good schools." The conversation ended there, but their message was crystal clear. I was on my own, completely and utterly alone in pursuing the dream that felt more essential to my identity than breathing. That night, I calculated exactly how much money I'd need to cover the remaining costs and realized I'd have to defer enrollment for a year to save enough funds. Working full-time at the diner while watching my friends head off to college was one of the most challenging periods of my life. Sophia left for her pre-med program with a car full of supplies my parents had proudly purchased, posting photos on social media of her dorm room and new textbooks. Carlos started his second year of engineering with similarly enthusiastic family support, while I picked up double shifts and counted every tip. The isolation was crushing at times. My high school friends were busy with college life, posting photos of parties and campus events that felt like glimpses into a world I'd chosen to leave behind. My family treated my gap year like confirmation that I'd made a mistake, offering regular reminders about community college programs that could still get me back on track toward a respectable career. But something unexpected happened during those long months of saving and planning. My skills in the diner kitchen improved dramatically, and Tommy started giving me more responsibility. He taught me about food costs and inventory management, about dealing with difficult customers and managing stress during rush periods. Most importantly, he showed me that working in a restaurant wasn't just about cooking, it was about creating experiences and memories for people. Every plate that leaves this kitchen carries a piece of your soul, he told me one evening as we prepped vegetables for the next day's service. People don't just eat food, they eat emotions and memories and feelings they can't name. When you understand that, you understand why this work matters. His words resonated deeply because I'd experienced that connection myself, both as a cook and as someone who'd grown up understanding how food could express love and care in ways that words couldn't capture. Every dish I prepared carried intentions and hopes. Whether it was a simple burger for a tired construction worker or a birthday dessert for a child celebrating with their grandparents, by the time I'd saved enough money to start culinary school, I wasn't the same uncertain 18-year-old who'd graduated high school. I was 19, financially independent, and absolutely certain about my path forward. The day I handed in my notice at the diner, Tommy shook my hand and made me promise to stay in touch. "You're going to do great things, Isabella," he said with the kind of confidence I wished my own family had shown. "Don't forget about us little people when you're running your own place." His casual mention of me running my own restaurant sparked something I hadn't allowed myself to fully imagine before. Up until that point, I'd focused entirely on getting through school and finding work in the industry, but suddenly I could picture myself as a restaurant owner, creating a space that reflected my vision and values. Culinary school was everything I'd hoped and more challenging than I'd anticipated. The days started early and ended late, filled with technique classes, food, safety training, and practical kitchen experience that pushed my skills far beyond what I'd learned at the diner. My classmates came from diverse backgrounds, but most had family support that I envied during particularly difficult moments. When my parents called during my first semester, the conversations were stilted and uncomfortable. They asked general questions about my classes but never showed genuine interest in what I was learning or achieving. Sophia would occasionally get on the phone to update me about her pre-med courses, speaking with the assumption that I'd eventually realize my mistake and join her in pursuing a more traditional career path. Loneliness was offset by the incredible community I found among my fellow students and instructors. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who understood that cooking was both an art and a science, who appreciated the complexity and creativity required to excel in professional kitchens. My knife skills improved rapidly. My palate developed sophistication I'd never imagined possible, and my confidence grew with every successful dish. During my second year, I had the opportunity to complete an externship at an upscale restaurant. Downtown, the head chef, a woman named Elena Vasquez, who'd worked in some of the most prestigious kitchens in the country, took me under her wing in ways that reminded me how much I'd missed having a mentor figure in my life. She was demanding, perfectionist, but she also recognized potential and wasn't afraid to push me toward excellence. "You have good instincts," she told me after watching me prepare a complex sauce during a busy Saturday night service. "But instincts without discipline are worthless. You need to learn to trust your skills while never stopping to improve them." Elena became the first person to seriously discuss restaurant ownership with me, sharing stories about her own journey from line cook to executive chef to eventual restaurant owner. She explained the business side of the industry that culinary school touched on but didn't fully explore, talking about everything from lease negotiations to staff management to marketing strategies. Running a restaurant is like conducting an orchestra where half the musicians are drunk and the other half hate the music, she said with a laugh that carried years of experience. But when everything comes together, when you create something that makes people happy and brings them together, there's no feeling like it in the world. Her encouragement planted the seed of an idea that grew throughout my remaining time in school. I started developing concepts for my own restaurant, sketching menu ideas and designing layouts during my free time. The dream felt both impossible and inevitable, like something I was destined to pursue regardless of the obstacles. Graduation day arrived with a mixture of pride and uncertainty about the future. My parents didn't attend the ceremony, claiming they couldn't take time off work, though I suspected their absence had more to do with their continued disapproval of my career choice. I sat in the auditorium surrounded by classmates whose families had traveled across the country to celebrate their achievements, feeling simultaneously accomplished and alone. After the ceremony, Elena approached me with an offer that would change everything. "I'm opening a second location next year," she said, her expression serious but warm. "I need a sous chef who understands my vision and has the skills to help execute it." The pay isn't amazing starting out, but you'd learn aspects of restaurant management that most chefs never see. Interested? Working as Elena's sous chef was like completing a master's degree in restaurant operations. She involved me in every aspect of the new location's development, from menu planning to staff hiring to vendor negotiations. I learned about food costs and profit margins, about creating efficient kitchen workflows and managing inventory. Most importantly, I gained first-hand experience in how successful restaurants balanced creativity with business practicality. The new restaurant was an immediate success, earning positive reviews and building a loyal customer base within its first 6 months. Elena gave me significant creative freedom with daily specials and seasonal menu changes, allowing me to develop a personal cooking style that blended traditional techniques with innovative presentations. My confidence as both a chef and a potential business owner grew with every successful service. During this period, my relationship with my family remained strained but civil. I'd call home occasionally to check in, sharing general updates about my work without going into details about my growing responsibilities or career advancement. They still viewed my job as temporary, something I'd eventually outgrow when I realized the limitations of restaurant work. The breaking point came during a Christmas visit home during my second year working with Elena. I'd been promoted to executive sous chef and was earning more money than Sophia made during her medical school residency, but my family still treated my career like an extended phase rather than a legitimate profession. "Isabella's still playing chef," my mother explained to a family friend who asked about my work during our holiday gathering. "She's learning valuable skills, but eventually she'll need to think about her long-term future. Restaurants are fine for young people, but they're not careers for adults with responsibilities." The dismissive tone in her voice sparked something inside me that had been building for years. I excused myself from the conversation and stepped outside into the cold December air, pulling out my phone to call Elena. When she answered, I could hear the sounds of her restaurant's busy holiday service in the background. "I want to do it," I said without preamble. "I want to open my own place. I know it's crazy and risky and all the things my family keeps telling me, but I can't keep working for other people when I have my own vision." Elena's response was immediate and supportive. "It's about time. You've been ready for months, you just needed to believe it yourself. Come in tomorrow and we'll start talking about the practical steps." Opening a restaurant is complicated, but it's not impossible, especially for someone with your skills and work ethic. The next 18 months were a whirlwind of planning, saving, and preparing for the biggest risk of my life. Elena connected me with a business advisor who specialized in restaurant startups, helping me develop a comprehensive business plan that covered everything from initial investment requirements to projected revenue streams. I learned about commercial real estate, equipment leasing, and the maze of permits and licenses required to operate a food service business. Finding the right location took months of searching and countless rejected applications. My credit was good, but my savings were limited, making it difficult to compete with established restaurant groups for prime spaces. Finally, I found a small storefront in an up-and-coming neighborhood that had recently undergone significant gentrification. The rent was manageable, the space had good bones, and the demographics suggested a customer base that would appreciate the kind of food I wanted to serve. The renovation process was exhausting but exhilarating. I spent my days working at Elena's restaurant and my evenings and weekends transforming the empty storefront into my vision of the perfect neighborhood bistro. Every decision, from the color of the walls to the style of the tables, reflected choices I'd been dreaming about for years. I decided to name the restaurant Bella's Kitchen, partly because Isabella felt too formal, and partly because I wanted the name to feel warm and welcoming rather than pretentious. The menu would focus on elevated comfort food with Latin influences, dishes that honored my cultural background while showcasing the technical skills I'd developed through years of training and experience. As opening day approached, I found myself working 20-hour days to ensure every detail was perfect. The stress was overwhelming at times, but it was balanced by an excitement I'd never experienced before. This was my restaurant, my vision, my chance to prove that cooking wasn't just a hobby or a phase, but a legitimate career path that could lead to success and fulfillment. 3 weeks before opening, I had the bronze plaque installed near the entrance. Bella's Kitchen, founded by Isabella Martinez, seemed straightforward enough, but I added a second line that felt important: for everyone who dared to dream. The inscription was partly for me and partly for other people who'd been told their passions weren't practical or profitable. The soft opening was planned for close friends and industry colleagues, people who could provide honest feedback about the food and service before we opened to the general public. Elena attended with several other chefs I'd met through her network, providing the kind of professional validation that felt more meaningful than any family celebration could have offered. "This is exactly what the neighborhood needed," Elena told me as she sampled my signature braised short ribs with plantain mash. "You've created something that feels both sophisticated and approachable, which is incredibly difficult to achieve. Your family should be proud of what you've accomplished." Her mention of my family reminded me that I hadn't told them about the restaurant. Our communication had become increasingly sporadic over the past year, limited to brief phone calls and holiday visits that felt more obligatory than genuine. Part of me wanted to share my achievement, but a larger part feared their continued dismissal would diminish my excitement about this major milestone. The grand opening exceeded my wildest expectations. We served over 200 customers during our first weekend, with wait times stretching to over an hour on Saturday night. The local food blogger who reviewed us gave a glowing assessment, praising both the quality of the food and the warmth of the atmosphere. Within a month, we were booked solid most evenings and had developed a loyal following of regular customers. Running my own restaurant was everything Elena had warned me about, and more rewarding than I dared to imagine. The days were long and physically demanding, the stress was constant, and the financial pressure never disappeared completely. But every satisfied customer, every positive review, every evening when the kitchen ran like a well-oiled machine felt like validation of every sacrifice I'd made to get there. 6 months after opening, I received a call that would change everything. My Aunt Rosa, the only family member who'd consistently supported my culinary ambitions, had mentioned the restaurant to my parents during a family gathering. She'd shown them photos from our social media accounts and shared some of the positive reviews we'd received from local publications. "Your parents want to make a reservation," Rosa explained during our phone conversation. "They don't know I'm calling you first, but I thought you should have some warning. They're curious about this restaurant that's been getting so much attention, and they have no idea it's yours." The irony was almost too perfect to be real. After years of dismissing my career and refusing to take my dreams seriously, my parents wanted to eat at my restaurant without knowing it belonged to their daughter. I could have called them directly and revealed the truth, but something made me hesitate. This felt like an opportunity to let my work speak for itself, to prove my worth through the success I'd built rather than through arguments or explanations. I made their reservation for the following Saturday evening, requesting that the hostess seat them at table 12, which had a perfect view of the bronze plaque by the entrance. I also asked our photographer to be present that evening, claiming we needed updated photos for our website, but really wanting to capture what I suspected would be a memorable evening. The days leading up to their visit were filled with nervous energy. I found myself obsessively reviewing every aspect of the restaurant's operation, from the cleanliness of the restrooms to the consistency of our signature dishes. This felt like the most important service of my career, even though my parents would initially have no idea they were being served by their daughter's restaurant. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather and a full dining room. I positioned myself in the kitchen doorway where I could observe the dining room without being easily seen by customers. My parents arrived precisely on time, dressed nicely but not formally, clearly treating this as a special occasion but not an extraordinary one. The hostess, who I'd briefed about the situation without revealing all the details, led them to table 12 with professional courtesy. I watched as they settled into their seats, my father adjusting his glasses to read the menu, while my mother glanced around the dining room with the kind of critical assessment she brought to any new experience. They spent several minutes discussing the menu options, clearly impressed by the variety and creativity of the offerings. I felt a surge of pride watching them react positively to dishes I'd spent months perfecting, recipes that represented years of training and experimentation. When they placed their order, choosing the braised short ribs and the seared salmon with mole sauce, I knew they'd selected two of our most popular and well-executed dishes. While they waited for their appetizers, I observed their conversation and body language. They seemed relaxed and happy, enjoying a rare evening out together without the stress of work or family obligations. My mother complimented the restaurant's atmosphere, noting the warm lighting and comfortable seating, while my father praised the efficient service and reasonable prices. Their appetizers arrived perfectly plated and properly timed, earning approving nods from both of them. I watched my mother taste the ceviche I'd developed based on my grandmother's recipe, seeing her eyes widen with surprise and pleasure at the complex layering of flavors. My father's reaction to the short rib empanadas was similarly positive, and I could see them discussing the quality and presentation of the food with growing enthusiasm. The main courses represented the culmination of everything I'd learned about cooking, combining technical skill with creative presentation and deep understanding of flavor profiles. I'd personally overseen the preparation of both dishes, ensuring they met the standards that had earned our restaurant its growing reputation for excellence. When the server placed the braised short ribs in front of my father, I watched his expression transform from polite expectation to genuine amazement. The meat was fork tender, the plantain mash was creamy and perfectly seasoned, and the reduction sauce tied everything together with rich, complex flavors that had taken me months to perfect. My mother's salmon was equally impressive, the fish cooked to precise doneness, and the mole sauce providing a sophisticated blend of chocolate and chilies that elevated the entire dish. They ate slowly, savoring each bite, and discussing the meal with the kind of enthusiasm I'd rarely seen from them about anything. My father, who typically rushed through meals to get back to work or other responsibilities, lingered over his food and asked the server detailed questions about the preparation methods. My mother, usually critical of restaurant prices, commented that the quality justified the cost and made the meal feel like exceptional value. As they finished their main courses, I noticed my father's gaze drift toward the bronze plaque near the entrance. He pointed it out to my mother, and I watched both of them reading the inscription with casual interest. The moment of recognition was gradual, like watching sunrise slowly illuminate a landscape. My father's expression shifted from mild curiosity to confusion to dawning realization, while my mother's face went through a similar transformation. They looked at each other, then back at the plaque, then around the dining room as if seeing it for the first time. My mother pulled out her phone, presumably to check our website or social media accounts for confirmation of what they were beginning to suspect. When she found photos of me in chef's whites standing in our kitchen, her hand went to her mouth in shock. The conversation that followed was animated but quiet, clearly an intense discussion about the implications of what they'd discovered. I could see my father shaking his head, not in disapproval, but in what appeared to be amazement or disbelief. My mother kept looking between her phone and the restaurant around them, as if trying to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the business owner who'd created this successful establishment. When their server approached to offer dessert, my father asked a question I'd been anticipating all evening. "Could we possibly speak with the chef? We'd like to compliment the meal and ask a few questions about the restaurant." This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating for months. I removed my apron, checked my appearance in the kitchen mirror, and walked through the dining room toward their table. The look on their faces when they saw me approaching was worth every doubt, every struggle, every moment of loneliness I'd experienced while building this dream into reality. "Hello, Mom. Hello, Dad," I said simply, standing beside their table with my hands clasped behind my back. "I hope you enjoyed your dinner." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever, though it was probably only a few seconds. My mother was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Isabella? This is your restaurant? You're the chef?" I nodded, gesturing around the dining room that represented years of planning and months of exhausting work. "This is Bella's kitchen. I opened it 8 months ago, and we've been booked solid most nights since the first week." My father's expression was unreadable, cycling through emotions I couldn't identify. Finally, he stood up and extended his hand as if meeting me for the first time. "Congratulations," he said formally. "This is truly impressive. The food was exceptional, and the restaurant is beautiful." His handshake turned into an awkward hug, the kind of embrace that carries years of misunderstanding and regret. My mother joined us, her eyes bright with tears she was trying not to shed in public. "Mija, I had no idea," she whispered. "This is incredible. You've built something amazing." We stood there for a moment, 3 people trying to navigate a conversation that needed to happen but felt too big for a busy restaurant dining room. Finally, I suggested they finish their meal and meet me after closing time, when we could talk privately without the pressure of other customers and staff members observing our family drama. They agreed to wait, ordering dessert and coffee, while I returned to the kitchen to oversee the remainder of the evening's service. The next few hours passed in a blur of orders and coordination, but my mind kept drifting to the conversation awaiting me. This felt like a turning point, not just in my relationship with my parents, but in my understanding of myself and what I'd accomplished. After the last customer left and the staff finished cleaning, I sat down with my parents at the same table where they'd eaten dinner. The restaurant felt different in the quiet aftermath of service, more intimate and personal than during the busy evening hours. This was my space, my creation, and for the first time my parents were seeing it through my eyes rather than their own preconceptions. "I owe you an apology," my father began, his voice heavy with emotion I'd rarely heard from him. "We were wrong about your dreams, wrong about this industry, and wrong about your capabilities. This restaurant is proof that we didn't understand what you were trying to build." My mother nodded in agreement, reaching across the table to take my hand. "We were scared for you, mija. We saw the struggles of people we knew who'd tried to make it in restaurants, and we didn't want you to experience that kind of uncertainty. But we were so focused on protecting you from failure that we couldn't see your potential for success." Their apologies felt genuine, but they also highlighted the years of isolation and self-doubt I'd experienced while building my career. "I understand why you were worried," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "But your fears became my biggest obstacles. Every time you dismissed my dreams or suggested I find a real job, it made everything harder." We talked for over 2 hours that night, discussing everything from my early interest in cooking to the challenges of running a small business. They asked detailed questions about my training, my business plan, and my future goals, showing the kind of genuine interest they'd never demonstrated before. It felt like meeting my parents as an adult for the first time, establishing a relationship based on mutual respect rather than childhood dynamics. As they prepared to leave, my father paused at the bronze plaque that had triggered their realization earlier in the evening. "For everyone who dared to dream," he read aloud. That's a beautiful sentiment, and I'm proud that my daughter is someone who had the courage to follow through on her dreams despite our doubts. Their visit marked the beginning of a new chapter in our family relationship. They became regular customers at the restaurant, bringing friends and extended family members to experience what their daughter had created. More importantly, they started referring to me as a chef and business owner rather than someone who was still figuring things out. The success of Bella's Kitchen continued to grow throughout the following year. We expanded our catering services, added weekend brunch, and started offering cooking classes in our private dining room. The local business community recognized me as Entrepreneur of the Year, and several food magazines featured articles about our innovative approach to Latin comfort food. But the most meaningful recognition came from my family, who finally understood that cooking wasn't just something I did for fun or as a temporary career. It was my calling, my passion, and my contribution to the world. Every successful service, every satisfied customer, every positive review felt like validation not just of my business decisions, but of the dreams they'd once dismissed as impractical. Sophia visited during her winter break from medical school, spending an entire evening in the kitchen learning some of my techniques and asking thoughtful questions about recipe development. "I never realized how complex this work really is," she admitted while practicing knife skills on vegetables for the next day's prep. "I thought cooking was just following recipes, but this requires the same kind of problem-solving and creativity that I use in medical research." Carlos brought his engineering colleagues for a team dinner, proudly introducing me as his sister who'd built a successful restaurant from scratch. Hearing him describe my achievements with genuine admiration felt like healing a wound I'd carried for years. The brother who'd once rolled his eyes at my culinary ambitions now spoke about my restaurant with the same pride he'd previously reserved for his own professional accomplishments. The transformation in my family's perception was complete when my parents asked if they could host their 30th wedding anniversary celebration at Bella's Kitchen. They wanted to share their special occasion in the space their daughter had created, surrounded by the community I'd built through food and hospitality. Planning their anniversary dinner felt like coming full circle. The same parents who'd once worried that my culinary dreams were impractical were now trusting me to create the perfect celebration for their most important milestone. I designed a special menu that included dishes inspired by their own cultural backgrounds, honoring the flavors that had shaped my earliest cooking experiences. The evening of their anniversary celebration was magical in ways I hadn't anticipated. 3 generations of our extended family gathered in my restaurant, sharing stories and laughter over food I'd prepared with love and skill developed through years of dedication. My grandmother, who'd taught me my first cooking techniques in her tiny kitchen, sat at the head table beaming with pride at what her granddaughter had accomplished. During the toast portion of the evening, my father stood to address the assembled family and friends. 30 years ago I married my best friend, he began, looking at my mother with the kind of love that had sustained their marriage through decades of challenges and changes. Tonight, we're celebrating not just our marriage, but the dreams that our children have turned into realities. He turned toward me, his voice thick with emotion. Our daughter, Isabella, taught us that dreams aren't impractical if you're willing to work hard enough to make them come true. This restaurant, this community she's built, this success she's earned, all of it came from her refusing to let our fears become her limitations. We're proud of the chef she's become, but we're even prouder of the woman who had the courage to believe in herself when nobody else would. The applause that followed felt like absolution, like forgiveness, like recognition of everything I'd sacrificed and achieved to reach this moment. Looking around the room at my family, my staff, my regular customers who'd become friends, I realized that success wasn't just about proving my parents wrong. It was about creating something meaningful that brought people together and made their lives a little bit better. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, I stood in my empty restaurant reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought me to this point. The bronze plaque still hung near the entrance, its inscription now feeling less like a challenge to my family and more like a promise to anyone who might need encouragement to pursue their own dreams. Bella's Kitchen had become more than just a successful business. It was proof that passion, combined with hard work, could overcome skepticism and doubt. It was evidence that family relationships could evolve and grow when people are willing to admit their mistakes and open their hearts to new understanding. Most importantly, it was a testament to the power of believing in yourself, even when nobody else believes in you. The girl who'd once been mocked for wanting to be a chef had become a woman who owned a thriving restaurant that bore her name. The family who'd laughed at her dreams now gathered regularly in the space she'd created, sharing meals and memories that would last for generations. The transformation wasn't just in their perception of my career, but in their understanding of what it means to support the people you love in pursuing their authentic selves. Every night as I lock the doors of Bella's Kitchen and turn off the lights, I'm reminded that dreams don't have expiration dates, and it's never too late to prove the doubters wrong. The most satisfying revenge isn't anger or resentment. It's success so undeniable that it transforms criticism into admiration and skepticism into support. My family learned to see me differently because I learned to see myself differently, and that shift in perspective made all the difference in the world. The restaurant continues to thrive, expanding into new ventures and reaching new customers who discover that good food can create connections that transcend cultural and generational boundaries. But at its heart, Bella's Kitchen remains what it was always meant to be. A place where dreams come true for anyone brave enough to pursue them, and where families can gather to celebrate not just special occasions, but the everyday miracle of love expressed through carefully prepared meals shared with the people who matter most. 2 years after my parents' anniversary celebration, an unexpected phone call would test everything I'd built in ways I never anticipated. The caller identified himself as Marcus Chen, a producer for the Food Network who'd been following our restaurant's growing reputation through social media and local press coverage. He was developing a new show called Hidden Gems that featured successful restaurants with compelling backstories, and Bella's Kitchen had caught his attention. "We're interested in featuring your restaurant on our program," Marcus explained during our initial conversation. "But what really intrigues us is the personal story behind Bella's Kitchen. Our research suggests there's a family dynamic that makes your success particularly meaningful." The opportunity felt surreal. Television exposure could transform Bella's Kitchen from a successful neighborhood restaurant into a nationally recognized establishment, potentially opening doors I'd never imagined possible. But it also meant sharing our family's private journey with millions of viewers, exposing the painful years of doubt and reconciliation that had shaped my path to success. I asked for time to consider the offer and discuss it with my family. The conversation with my parents revealed how much their perspective had evolved since that transformative dinner 2 years earlier. My mother, who'd once worried about the instability of restaurant work, now encouraged me to seize opportunities that could expand my influence in the culinary world. "Mija, your story could inspire other young people whose families don't understand their dreams," she said during our discussion. "If sharing our mistakes helps even one person feel less alone in pursuing their passion, then it's worth the discomfort of admitting we were wrong." My father agreed, adding his own perspective on the potential impact of national exposure. "You've already proven that your dreams were valid and achievable. Now you have a chance to show other people that family support isn't required for success, but it makes the journey more meaningful when it finally arrives." Their willingness to participate in filming surprised me, considering how private they'd always been about family matters. But I realized their transformation wasn't just about accepting my career choice, it was about understanding their role in either supporting or hindering their children's authentic selves. The filming process took place over several weeks, with camera crews documenting everything from our daily prep work to busy dinner services. Marcus and his team interviewed my family members separately, capturing their honest reflections about the years of misunderstanding and the eventual recognition of my achievements. Watching my parents speak candidly about their initial resistance to my culinary ambitions was both painful and healing. My father admitted that his fears about restaurant work had been based on outdated assumptions and limited exposure to the modern food industry. My mother acknowledged that her desire to protect me from uncertainty had actually created more obstacles than the career path itself presented. Sophia's interview revealed insights I hadn't expected. She spoke about feeling guilty for years, about her dismissive comments regarding my dreams, explaining that her criticism had stemmed from her own insecurities about choosing a demanding career path. Seeing my success had helped her understand that passion and practicality weren't mutually exclusive, and that following your authentic interests often led to more sustainable satisfaction than pursuing careers based solely on external expectations. Carlos discussed how my persistence had influenced his own approach to risk-taking in his engineering career. He'd recently left a stable corporate position to join a startup developing sustainable energy technologies, a decision he credited to watching how my commitment to cooking had ultimately paid off despite initial setbacks. The episode aired 6 months later during prime time, reaching an audience of over 2 million viewers. The response was overwhelming, with hundreds of emails from aspiring chefs whose families had dismissed their culinary interests, young entrepreneurs whose parents favored traditional career paths, and parents who recognized themselves in my family's initial skepticism. But the most significant impact wasn't the national attention or the surge in reservations that followed the broadcast. It was the phone call I received from Tommy, my former mentor from the diner where I'd worked during high school. Now in his 70s, and dealing with health issues that had forced him into retirement, he'd watched the show from his assisted living facility. "I always knew you'd make it big, kid," he said, his voice weaker than I remembered but filled with the same warmth that had sustained me during those crucial early years. "But seeing your family come around, seeing them understand what I saw in you all those years ago, that's the real victory." Tommy's call reminded me that success wasn't just about proving doubters wrong. It was about honoring the people who'd believed in me when belief was scarce. I decided to establish a scholarship fund in his name, providing financial assistance to culinary students who, like me, were pursuing their education without family support. The scholarship announcement coincided with another major development in my career. Elena, my former boss, who'd become a close friend and ongoing mentor, approached me with a proposition that would challenge everything I thought I wanted from my professional life. "I'm retiring," she announced during one of our monthly coffee meetings. "My husband wants to move to Costa Rica, and honestly, I'm ready for a different kind of adventure. But I don't want to sell my restaurants to some corporate group that will strip away everything we've built." She paused, studying my reaction carefully before continuing. "I want to offer you first refusal on purchasing both locations. The numbers work, especially with your recent publicity, and I can't think of anyone who would better preserve the culture and standards we've established." The offer was generous, but daunting. Acquiring Elena's restaurants would instantly transform me from a single location owner into someone managing a small restaurant group. The financial investment would be substantial, requiring me to leverage everything I'd built at Bella's Kitchen, but the potential for growth was extraordinary. More importantly, Elena's restaurants had been instrumental in my development as a chef and business owner. Taking over her legacy felt like both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. I would be preserving not just two successful businesses, but the training ground where countless young cooks had learned their craft. After weeks of financial analysis and soul-searching, I decided to move forward with the acquisition. The process required me to bring in investors, something I'd never done before but which opened my eyes to aspects of business growth I'd never considered. One of those investors turned out to be my brother Carlos, who'd earned significant equity in his startup and wanted to diversify his investments while supporting his sister's expansion. "Consider it my way of making up for all those years when I didn't take your dreams seriously," he said when he offered to contribute a substantial portion of the required capital. "Plus, it's a good investment. You've proven you know how to make restaurants profitable." The expansion process consumed the next year of my life, requiring me to develop systems and management structures that could maintain quality across multiple locations. I hired additional sous chefs, implemented standardized training programs, and learned to delegate responsibilities that I'd previously handled personally. The most challenging aspect wasn't the operational complexity, It was maintaining the personal connection that had made Bella's Kitchen special while scaling to serve hundreds more customers across 3 locations. Each restaurant needed to feel authentic and welcoming, not like a cookie-cutter franchise operation. The solution came through hiring managers who shared my values and empowering them to adapt our core concepts to their specific communities. Elena's original location served a more upscale clientele, so we refined the menu to include more sophisticated preparations while maintaining the warmth and creativity that defined our brand. The second location was in a family-oriented suburb, so we expanded our children's menu and added weekend activities that would appeal to parents dining with young kids. Throughout this expansion period, my relationship with my family continued to evolve in unexpected ways. My parents became unofficial ambassadors for all 3 restaurants, bringing friends and colleagues to experience what their daughter had created. Their pride was evident but never overwhelming, striking a balance between support and space that I'd never experienced during my childhood. My mother started helping with administrative tasks during her retirement, using her organizational skills to manage our growing catering business. She approached the work with the same attention to detail she'd brought to her accounting career, but with an enthusiasm that suggested she was genuinely invested in my success rather than just looking for ways to stay busy. My father, who'd always been reserved about expressing emotions, began writing online reviews for all 3 restaurants that were both honest and heartfelt. His reviews mentioned his daughter's role as owner chef, but focused primarily on the food quality and service experience, rather than making it about family pride. The 3rd anniversary of the Food Network episode brought an unexpected opportunity that would once again challenge my assumptions about my career trajectory. A publisher approached me about writing a cookbook that would combine recipes from all 3 restaurants with the story of building my business despite family skepticism. Writing the cookbook forced me to articulate cooking techniques and business principles I'd internalized through years of practice. More importantly, it required me to reflect on the lessons learned through conflict and reconciliation with my family. The book wouldn't just be about food, it would be about the courage required to pursue authentic dreams and the patience needed to help the people you love understand choices they initially fear. The writing process took 18 months, during which I worked with a collaborator who helped translate my conversational explanations into clear, accessible instructions. We tested every recipe multiple times, ensuring that home cooks could successfully recreate dishes that had been developed for professional kitchen equipment and trained staff. But the most meaningful part of the book was the family stories interwoven throughout the recipes. Each chapter included reflections from my parents, siblings, and even Tommy about how food had played a role in our relationships and misunderstandings. My mother contributed family recipes that had influenced my cooking style, while my father wrote about learning to appreciate complexity in both food and career choices. Sophia, now completing her medical residency, wrote about the parallels between pursuing challenging careers in cooking and medicine. She acknowledged that both fields required passion, dedication, and resilience in the face of criticism and setbacks. Her contribution to the book felt like a full-circle moment, transforming her from someone who dismissed my dreams into someone who understood their value. The cookbook launch coincided with the opening of our 4th location, a fast, casual concept that made our food accessible to customers who wanted quality but couldn't afford fine dining prices. This expansion required developing new systems for food preparation and service, but it also fulfilled a goal I'd harbored since opening Bella's Kitchen, making good food available to people regardless of their economic circumstances. The book signing events drew crowds that included not just food enthusiasts, but families working through their own conflicts about career choices and generational expectations. Parents brought adult children whose artistic or entrepreneurial ambitions they were learning to support, while young people shared stories about pursuing dreams despite family resistance. One particularly moving encounter involved a teenage girl whose parents had accompanied her to the book signing, despite their skepticism about her interest in becoming a pastry chef. As I signed their copy of the cookbook, the girl's mother asked quietly, "How did you convince your parents to believe in you?" "I didn't," I replied honestly. "I convinced myself to believe in me, and eventually they saw the results of that belief. Sometimes you have to be your own supporter before anyone else can join you." The conversation that followed revealed a family dynamic remarkably similar to my own early experiences. The parents' concerns were rooted in love and fear rather than dismissal, but their daughter interpreted the questions about practicality and stability as lack of faith in her abilities and potential. "May I suggest something?" I asked, looking between the teenager and her parents. "Instead of arguing about whether pastry arts is a viable career, why don't you visit some local bakeries together? Talk to the owners about their experiences, both the challenges and the rewards. Let your daughter show you what she's passionate about, instead of telling you why you should share that passion." 6 months later, I received a thank you card from that same family. The daughter had enrolled in a part-time pastry program while finishing high school, and her parents had become regular customers at the bakery where she'd started working weekends. Their note explained that seeing their daughter's joy and skill in action had helped them understand that supporting her dreams didn't require sharing her specific interests, just respecting her commitment to pursuing them. These interactions reminded me that my story wasn't unique in its broad strokes, even if the specific details were personal to my family. Countless young people faced skepticism about unconventional career choices, and countless parents struggled to balance protective instincts with supportive encouragement. The cookbook and restaurant expansion had given me a platform to address these dynamics, but the real impact came through individual conversations and connections. The success of the cookbook led to speaking engagements at culinary schools and business conferences, where I shared insights about building a restaurant business and navigating family relationships during career transitions. These presentations allowed me to reach aspiring entrepreneurs who might be facing similar challenges with unsupportive families or personal doubts about pursuing their authentic interests. During one particularly memorable conference presentation, a young man in the audience asked how I'd maintained motivation during the years when my family didn't believe in my dreams. His question sparked a discussion about internal versus external validation that resonated with many attendees who were struggling with similar issues. "External validation is wonderful when it comes," I explained. "But it can't be your primary source of motivation because it's unreliable and often delayed. You'll have to find ways to measure your own progress and celebrate your own achievements, even when nobody else recognizes them yet." The response to these speaking engagements convinced me to develop a more formal mentorship program through our restaurants. We began offering internships not just for culinary students, but for young entrepreneurs interested in learning about small business operations. The program paired participants with experienced staff members who could provide guidance about both technical skills and personal development. My parents volunteered to participate in the mentorship program, sharing their perspective on family dynamics and career transitions with young people whose own families were struggling to understand unconventional career choices. Their willingness to discuss their mistakes and learning process provided valuable insights for both participants and their families. "We can't change the years when we didn't support Isabella's dreams," my mother explained to one group of mentorship participants and their parents. "But we could help other families avoid making the same mistakes by sharing what we learned about the difference between protecting your children and limiting them." These sessions often became emotional as parents and children recognized their own conflicts in our family's story. But they also provided a safe space for honest conversations about fear, expectations, and the courage required to support someone else's dreams, even when you don't fully understand them. The mentorship program's success led to partnerships with local high schools and community colleges, where we offered workshops about entrepreneurship and career exploration. These programs reached students who might never have considered restaurant work as a viable career path, exposing them to the business and creative aspects of food service that aren't always visible to customers. One of the most rewarding aspects of these educational initiatives was seeing young people discover passions they didn't know they had. Students who'd planned to pursue traditional careers sometimes found themselves drawn to the creativity and community aspects of restaurant work, while others gained appreciation for the complexity and skill required in professional kitchens. As Bella's Kitchen entered its 5th year of operation, I realized that my definition of success had evolved far beyond the initial goal of proving my family wrong. The restaurants had become platforms for broader conversations about following authentic paths, supporting unconventional dreams, and building businesses that served their communities rather than just generating profits. The bronze plaque that had once felt like a statement of defiance now seemed more like an invitation to anyone who needed permission to pursue their dreams. The inscription, "For everyone who dared to dream," had taken on deeper meaning as I watched it inspire conversations between family members, mentorship participants, and random customers who noticed it while waiting for their tables. My relationship with my family had also deepened beyond the reconciliation that followed their discovery of my restaurant ownership. We'd become collaborators in various projects, with each family member contributing their unique skills and perspectives to initiatives that extended our impact beyond food service. Sophia had started referring patients with eating disorders to our nutrition workshops, where we focused on developing healthy relationships with food rather than restrictive dieting approaches. Her medical expertise, combined with my culinary knowledge, created programs that addressed both physical and emotional aspects of nutrition and cooking. Carlos had helped us implement sustainable energy systems across all our restaurant locations, reducing our environmental impact while demonstrating that successful businesses could prioritize social responsibility alongside profitability. His engineering background brought technical solutions to operational challenges I wouldn't have considered addressing. Even our extended family had become involved in various aspects of the business. My Aunt Rosa, who'd been my earliest supporter, now managed our social media accounts with creativity and authenticity that reflected our values while reaching new audiences. Her background in education helped her craft content that was both engaging and informative. The growth and evolution of Bella's Kitchen had transformed it from a personal victory into something larger and more meaningful than I'd ever imagined possible. What had started as a desire to prove my worth had become a platform for helping other people recognize their own potential and navigate the complex dynamics of family support and career authenticity. As I stood in the original Bella's Kitchen location 5 years after opening, surrounded by staff members who'd become like family and customers who'd become friends, I understood that the most important victory wasn't convincing my parents that I was right about my career choice. It was learning to believe in myself strongly enough that their initial skepticism couldn't derail my dreams, and then using that experience to help other people develop the same kind of unshakable self-confidence. The restaurant industry had given me more than financial success or professional recognition. It had provided a way to create community, support other dreamers, and demonstrate that authenticity and determination could overcome almost any obstacle. The girl who'd once been laughed at for wanting to cook professionally had become a woman whose story inspired others to pursue their own authentic paths, regardless of initial resistance or doubt. The transformation was complete, but the impact was just beginning. 7 years after opening Bella's Kitchen, an email arrived that would challenge everything I thought I understood about my own story. The sender identified herself as Maria Santos, a culinary student at the same institute where I'd earned my degree. She'd read my cookbook and watched the Food Network episode, but her message contained information that stopped me cold. Ms. Martinez, I hope this email finds you well. I'm writing because I believe we may be connected in ways you don't realize. My mother, Carmen Santos, worked as a line cook at several restaurants in the 1990s. She always spoke about a young woman who helped her during a particularly difficult period, someone who shared food and encouraged her to keep pursuing her dreams, despite language barriers and discrimination she faced as an immigrant worker. Maria's email included a photograph that made my hands tremble. It showed my grandmother standing next to a younger woman in a restaurant kitchen, both wearing stained aprons and tired smiles. I recognized the background as the small family restaurant where my grandmother had worked part-time during my childhood, supplementing my grandfather's income during his illness. My mother passed away 3 years ago, but she never forgot the kindness your grandmother showed her. She said Isabella's grandmother was the reason she didn't give up on cooking when other workers made her feel unwelcome. She always hoped to find your family again to express her gratitude. But she only knew your grandmother's first name and that her granddaughter wanted to be a chef someday. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My grandmother, who died during my second year of culinary school, had been mentoring other aspiring cooks decades before I'd even considered pursuing professional training. The encouragement she'd given me in her tiny kitchen had been part of a larger pattern of supporting people whose dreams were dismissed or discouraged by circumstances beyond their control. Maria's email continued with details that painted a picture of my grandmother I'd never fully understood. Carmen had been a single mother working multiple jobs to support her children, facing hostility from co-workers who resented her limited English and different cooking techniques. My grandmother had not only defended Carmen, but had actively taught her American cooking methods while learning traditional Mexican recipes in return. My mother said your grandmother told her that food was a language everyone could understand, and that kitchens should be places where people helped each other succeed rather than compete. Those words shaped how my mother approached her entire career, and she passed that philosophy on to me. I spent that evening digging through family photographs and documents, looking for evidence of my grandmother's mentorship that I'd been too young to recognize at the time. I found references in her personal letters to helping the girls at work and teaching Carmen the way Mrs. Johnson taught me, suggesting a lineage of support that stretched back generations. The discovery fundamentally changed how I understood my own journey. My grandmother's encouragement hadn't been unique to me. It had been part of her broader commitment to helping people overcome obstacles that stood between them and their authentic selves. My success wasn't just about proving my family wrong. It was about continuing a tradition of empowerment that my grandmother had established decades earlier. I arranged to meet Maria when she visited our city for a culinary competition. She was a talented chef with a style that blended traditional Mexican techniques with modern presentation, creating dishes that honored her heritage while appealing to contemporary palates. Our conversation revealed striking parallels between her mother's experiences and my own, separated by 30 years, but connected by shared struggles against discrimination and doubt. My mother always said that success meant more than personal achievement, Maria explained as we talked in Bella's kitchen after closing time. She believed we had a responsibility to help other people who faced similar challenges. That's why I'm pursuing my degree, not just to become a chef, but to create opportunities for other immigrant women who might face the same barriers she encountered. Maria's perspective inspired me to examine my own responsibilities more deeply. The success of my restaurants and cookbook had given me a platform, but I hadn't fully considered how to use that influence to address systemic issues within the culinary industry. My focus had been primarily on individual mentorship and family dynamics, but Maria's story highlighted broader patterns of discrimination and exclusion that required more comprehensive responses. We decided to collaborate on establishing a scholarship program specifically for immigrant students pursuing culinary careers. The initiative would provide not just financial assistance but also mentorship, language support, and connections to restaurant owners committed to inclusive hiring practices. We named it the Carmen Isabella Martinez Memorial Scholarship, honoring both Maria's mother and my grandmother. Launching the scholarship program required partnerships with culinary schools, immigration advocacy organizations, and restaurant industry associations. The process educated me about challenges I'd never fully appreciated, from visa restrictions that limited work opportunities to credentialing systems that didn't recognize training received in other countries. My parents became active supporters of the scholarship initiative, with my mother using her accounting background to manage the program's finances, and my father leveraging his business connections to recruit sponsor Bala. Restaurants. Their involvement represented another evolution in our relationship, moving from personal reconciliation to shared commitment to social impact. "Your grandmother would be proud of what you're doing," my mother told me during one of our planning meetings. She always believed that success meant helping other people succeed, not just proving you could overcome obstacles yourself. The first scholarship recipients included students from 6 different countries, each bringing unique culinary traditions and personal stories of resilience. Working with them reminded me of my own experiences as an outsider in various environments, but also highlighted privileges I'd taken for granted despite my family's initial lack of support. One recipient, a young man named Ahmed, who'd fled Syria with his family, possessed extraordinary skills in Middle Eastern cuisine, but struggled with English language requirements in his coursework. Another, a woman named Chen Li from rural China, had learned traditional dumpling-making techniques from her grandmother, but needed training in modern food safety protocols and restaurant management. Creating support systems for these students required expanding my understanding of mentorship beyond career guidance to include cultural adaptation, language development, and navigation of immigration. Bureaucracy. The process was challenging but rewarding, providing deeper insight into my grandmother's legacy of cross-cultural support and teaching. The scholarship program's success attracted attention from national culinary organizations and immigration advocacy groups. Within 2 years, we'd expanded from supporting 6 students annually to providing assistance for over 30 recipients across multiple culinary schools throughout the country. But the most significant development wasn't the program's growth. It was the network of alumni who began supporting subsequent scholarship recipients. Maria, who'd completed her degree with highest honors, opened her own restaurant and immediately began hiring other immigrant cooks while mentoring younger students facing similar challenges. This ripple effect reminded me of Tommy's influence on my own development and Elena's role in advancing my career. Success in the culinary industry seemed to require not just individual excellence, but participation in networks of mutual support that helped talented people overcome systemic barriers. The scholarship program's visibility led to an unexpected opportunity when the James Beard Foundation invited me to serve on their committee addressing diversity and inclusion in professional kitchens. The appointment was both an honor and a responsibility that required me to think beyond my own restaurants and consider industry-wide patterns of exclusion and discrimination. Working with the James Beard Foundation introduced me to chef activists across the country who are using their platforms to address issues ranging from wage inequality to sexual harassment to environmental sustainability. These connections helped me understand that my individual success story was part of larger movements toward more equitable and just food systems. One particularly impactful collaboration involved partnering with urban farming initiatives to source produce from local growers while providing fresh food access to underserved communities. The project required modifying our supply chains and menu planning, but it also created connections between our restaurants and neighborhood residents who'd never considered fine dining accessible, relevant to their lives. These community partnerships evolved into cooking classes offered in local schools and community centers, where we taught basic knife skills and nutrition education alongside discussions about food justice and career opportunities in culinary arts. The classes attracted participants ranging from elementary students to senior citizens, creating intergenerational learning environments that reminded me of cooking with my grandmother decades earlier. The educational programs also provided training opportunities for our scholarship recipients, who served as assistant instructors while developing teaching skills that would benefit them throughout their careers. This model created sustainable support systems that didn't depend entirely on my personal involvement or the resources of our restaurant group. As Bella's Kitchen approached its 10th anniversary, I realized that the business had evolved far beyond the restaurant concept I'd originally envisioned. We'd become a platform for social change, a training ground for emerging leaders, and a demonstration that successful businesses could prioritize community impact alongside financial sustainability. The anniversary celebration brought together scholarship recipients, mentorship program graduates, community partners, and family members who'd witnessed the entire journey from my teenage declarations about wanting to cook professionally to this complex network of initiatives addressing systemic inequities. During the anniversary dinner, held in the original Bella's Kitchen location, I found myself surrounded by people whose lives had intersected with mine in ways that extended far beyond customer relationships, business transactions. Maria had become a close friend and collaborating partner, her restaurant now featuring fusion dishes that celebrated both our cultural backgrounds. Ahmed had completed his culinary degree and was developing a catering business specializing in Middle Eastern cuisine for corporate clients who'd never been exposed to authentic Syrian flavors. Chenli had started a food truck that served traditional Chinese street food, building a customer base that included both nostalgic immigrants and adventurous local food enthusiasts. Tommy, now 81 and using a wheelchair but still sharp as ever, attended the celebration with several other former diner colleagues who'd followed my career through local media coverage. His presence reminded me that mentorship relationships could span decades and continue influencing decisions long after formal training relationships ended. "You know what makes me proudest?" Tommy asked during a quiet moment in the evening's festivities. "It's not just that you became successful. It's that you're using your success to create the kind of support system you never had when you were starting out. That's the real measure of a leader." Elena, who'd returned from Costa Rica specifically for the anniversary celebration, offered her own perspective on the evolution of our original mentor-student relationship. "When I hired you as my sous chef, I saw potential for excellence in cooking and restaurant management. I never imagined you'd become someone who could transform an entire industry's approach to inclusion and mentorship." But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from my parents, who'd prepared a speech that reflected on their own transformation alongside mine. Standing before the assembled guests, my father acknowledged not just his initial skepticism about my career choice, but his broader assumptions about success and achievement. 10 years ago, we thought success meant choosing safe careers that provided financial security and social respectability, he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of reflection. "We've learned that real success means having the courage to pursue authentic goals and the wisdom to use your achievements to help other people pursue theirs." My mother added her own insights about the difference between protecting children and limiting them, acknowledging that their fears about my career choice had been based on narrow definitions of stability and respectability. Isabella taught us that taking risks for something you believe in is safer than accepting limitations based on other people's fears. Their speech concluded with an announcement that surprised even me. They were establishing an additional scholarship fund focused specifically on supporting young women from working-class families who wanted to pursue entrepreneurship in food service or related fields. The fund would be managed through our existing program, but would address specific barriers faced by women from backgrounds similar to mine. "We can't change the years when we didn't support our daughters' dreams," my mother explained to the audience. "But we can help other parents learn to recognize and nurture their children's authentic ambitions before skepticism becomes discouragement." The evening ended with a ceremony honoring my grandmother's memory and influence, featuring stories from scholarship recipients about how her philosophy of kitchen-based mentorship had shaped their own approaches to career development and community support. Maria spoke about her mother's descriptions of my grandmother's kindness, connecting past and present in ways that made the entire gathering feel like a family reunion spanning generations and cultures. As I cleaned up after the celebration, I discovered a note that Maria had left near the bronze plaque that still hung by the entrance. Her message read, "Your grandmother would be proud not just of what you've accomplished, but of how you've used your success to honor her legacy of supporting other dreamers." The circle continues. Standing alone in my restaurant at midnight, surrounded by empty tables that had hosted conversations about dreams, obstacles, and possibilities, I understood that my story wasn't really about proving my family wrong or achieving individual success, despite their initial lack of support. It was about discovering a calling that connected me to something larger than personal ambition, and using that discovery to create opportunities for other people who might otherwise remain invisible or discouraged. The bronze plaque had evolved from a statement of defiance to a promise of inclusion, and Bella's Kitchen had become proof that one person's authentic pursuit of their dreams could ripple outward in ways that transformed communities and inspired movements. The girl who'd been laughed at for wanting to cook professionally had become a woman whose impact extended far beyond any single restaurant or personal achievement. But most importantly, I'd learned that the most satisfying revenge against those who doubt your dreams isn't proving them wrong through individual success. It's using that success to ensure that other dreamers don't have to overcome the same obstacles alone, creating systems of support that make authentic pursuits more accessible for everyone who follows after you. The transformation wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd been touched by the expanding circle of possibility that had grown from one small restaurant into a movement that honored both tradition and innovation, individual achievement and collective empowerment. My grandmother's legacy lived on not just through my success, but through every person who'd found encouragement to pursue their own authentic path within the community we'd built together.